I'd now like to introduce Phil Hill, who will chair our next panel. Dr. Hill has more than 40 years of experience in marine, geological, and geohazard research in the Atlantic, Pacific, and Arctic Oceans of Canada. Phil spent 9 years at l'Université du Québec, Rimouski, excuse-moi, as a professor of oceanography before joining the Geological Survey of Canada as a research scientist, where he managed several large research programs related to ocean management, climate change, and marine geohazards. From 2014 to 2019, he was director of the Geological Survey of Canada Pacific Division, which included earthquake risk assessment in its portfolio. Phil retired in 2021, but to our great pleasure, he continues to be active in WCOGs and in marine geoscience research. Phil?
Great, thanks, Bill. So in this panel discussion on advancing methodologies for multi-hazard and systemic risk assessment, we're going to delve into some of the different methodologies and details of how to go from knowledge of the natural hazard to risk assessment and mitigation. Each of our panelists has a wealth of experience in this field. Dr. Hector Perez is a seismic risk engineer at the Colombian Geological Survey and an assistant professor of structural engineering at the Université Escuela Colombiana de Ingeniería in Bogotá, Colombia. He will give us a brief account of how Colombia has worked with the global earthquake model to complete targeted city and national earthquake risk assessments. So staying in the mainly earthquake domain, Dr. David Wald, a seismologist with the U.S. Geological Survey at the National Earthquake Information Center, will give us an overview of how the U.S. handles earthquake hazard and risk assessment, as well as communicates this out to the public and to decision makers. Then Mr. Mark Edwards, the director of the Vulnerability, Resilience and Mitigation section at Geoscience Australia, will broaden the discussion into other natural hazard areas. Mark leads a multidisciplinary team that's collaboratively developing an evidence base to inform decision makers on strategies for mitigating natural hazard risk in the built environment, including that posed by earthquakes and severe wind. And then finally, Ms. Chesley Williams will give us an insurance sector perspective. So Chesley is a senior director of product management for Moody's Risk Management Solutions, RMS, excuse me. RMS develops strategic risk management solutions for insurers, reinsurers, financial service organizations, and the public sector. So before we start, I know that the panelists will all be presenting a lot of details in their talks and in their slides that cannot really be covered, all the details in 10-minute presentations. A reminder then that this webinar is being recorded and the presentations will be made available after the event. So you'll be able to access most of the details that way. If you have any questions for the panel, please enter them in the Q&A tab, and I'll try and bring them forward for the panel members to answer. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Hector Perez.